Hi, this is Ken Adams, contract drafting guy, author of a manual style for contract drafting. You can find whatever I have to offer at adamsdrafting.com. My particular purpose today is to discuss my recently launched course, Drafting Clearer Contracts Masterclass. And for that, I have on hand three veterans of the trial series that I just ran of Masterclass. They survived the experience, and they're here to just tell us a little bit about it. I'd like you three to each introduce yourselves. How about Gabe? We'll start with you.
Hi, I'm Gabe Meister, of the law office of Gabe Meister, as it were. I was in private practice since 1998. I was at large firm Morrison and Forster for 16 years. Then I went in-house for 4 years and started my own practice in early 2019.
Thank you. Jen?
I'm Jennifer Romer-Helzer. I'm the Director of Global Contracts for an oil and gas services company in Houston. I'm not an attorney, but I've been doing contracts for 20 plus years, I suppose.
Okay. Colin?
I'm Colin Cannell. I work for NetFriends, which is a small IT services company in Durham, North Carolina, and I have no formal law training. I've been doing contracts for about 3 or 4 years, mostly because I was the only person at the company who was willing to do them. So that's the extent of my training.
Okay. The fact that we have two people without a law degree is there's no particular message there. I think all the others in the trial group were lawyers, but I think I'm glad to have them on hand simply because, as I've already expressed to them, I don't think that having a law degree is relevant in terms of how well you understand a deal and how well you can express the deal in a contract. So I think that lawyers have a stranglehold on contracts largely because they're just good at amassing turf. They're just good at staking out territory. And I would like Masterclass to perhaps help bring, just help level the playing field a little and help make anyone who wants to work with contracts more comfortable about dealing with contract language in a rational way. I'd like to start off the proceedings by sharing the screen and showing you a little bit about what Masterclass consists of. So we have 8 live 1-hour Zoom sessions. Generally, they'll be 1 week apart, but it can be structured otherwise for any organization that wants to do Masterclass for a group. And you'll see on the left here that there are a bunch of, there's an entry for each of the sessions. And if you click on a session, you'll have different lessons within the session. The first one being the Zoom information. But beyond that, each session will generally have a list of reading. And there are also a number of quizzes. And this quiz happens to be on the front and the back of the contract. So hey, I'll answer a question, and darn, I got it wrong. Some of the quizzes can be quite engaging. The one on ambiguity has a grand total of 50 questions. Let's have a look at session 6 and. Actually, no, which one is it? Defined term, session 4. So we also have, throughout the course, we will look at extracts from a standard set of big company terms. So here is one such extract. Actually, no, this happens to be one of my own things, where I've highlighted problematic use of defined terms. there's just something to do with defined terms that is problematic. So the idea is we go through and we discuss what those problematic aspects are. Let's see. I think on extract 7 we have extract set of terms, right? I'll download this. This is one of those standard set of terms where I highlighted just any words or phrases that are worth discussing. And in this case, the topic to be discussed is buried verbs, where you use abstract nouns rather than verbs, and generally that has some adverse consequences. So we talk through that. Those are just representative examples of the sorts of things we spend our time on during the course. I will now stop sharing and come back to the group. I'll note that one factor that has guided me rather in the course is that I'm not here to grade people, largely because I just don't think it's practical. Instead, I regard myself as a facilitator. It's a matter of making available the reading, drawn largely from my book, A Manual Style for Contract Drafting, making available materials that we're going to discuss, and then facilitating the discussion and offering my own assessment with perhaps an annotated, a set of, I'll give an extract that we looked at with issues highlighted. I'll then provide my version annotated to explain how I'd handle those particular issues. But let's start off with perhaps a more general question. What do you think you got out of Masterclass, bearing in mind that it was the trial run? So you saw all sorts of dead ends and glitches and flip-flops, but taking that into account, Colin.
I thought one of the things that I got at, so I had read MSCD, I've got the 3rd and 4th editions, but I'm very self-taught. And so one of the things I really got out of it was just in terms of going through and looking at each type of thing, buried verbs and categories of language. You put up an example and I would see 5 things and you would be like, here's the 15 things that are wrong. And so it really helped me to understand how much depth there was to all of these different things, how much more there was to see than what I was seeing. That was the first thing. And then the second thing was that you really helped articulate why certain things were wrong. Because I had a good intuitive sense of, I look at this, it's not quite right. I can think of ways that are better, but I wouldn't be able to articulate why one way is better than another way, especially to someone who isn't already sympathetic to my way of doing it. And so for anybody who has to work in an organization where you're sort of the vanguard of this new natural language kind of contract drafting, having this masterclass and getting used to needing to articulate why this way is better, I think is really helpful.
Okay, Gabe?
So there were several things that I got out of the class at different times, different parts of the class. First of all, the opportunity to read the manual style for contract drafting with a purpose other than self-edification, just generally. So when you have a class the next day, and if you haven't done it already, you do your reading, but you're actually reading to understand and absorb, knowing that you're going to be talking about that text in detail and using the things that you've learned right away. And also watching other people pick out different parts of the same paragraph or sentence or clause that you hadn't seen. Just like Colin mentioned, you will see 5 things and somebody else will see 3 different things, and Ken, you'll see, here are the 10 other things that you have to think about. That's just a very valuable way to learn. The class is a great tool for somebody who really learns by using what they've read. So it's not just an exercise of reading and taking quizzes. I have also found that it gives structure and names to things, like Colin said, that I've been doing or not doing for a long time. And I had an intuitive sense of why something might be better than another way of doing it. But this helps reinforce that sense and give a way to explain it to people. And it gives me hope and motivation to try to pass these things along to clients, to counterparties. It gives me ways to speak about these things when I'm using them in practice.
Okay. Jen.
Well, as Colin is, I'm also mostly self-taught. I have a JM and a MPA, but you don't ever get into contract law and the nuances of that. You know, probably should have been an English major, would have been a nice underlying degree program. But the benefit to me, I learned by doing. In contracts, that's really the only way to do this, especially if you are a specialist like I am in pure oil and gas contracts. You learn by doing, and so a lot of times the attorneys that I deal with don't have experience in oil and gas, and then now I can honestly say a lot of them don't have experience in drafting, for all that it's what they do. Mm-hmm. So I learned by doing. It's one thing to read the book, and believe me, I do. I've had second, third, and fourth editions now. It's my first copy is dog-eared and tattered and beat up, but there's nothing like reading it and then having you throw up a 50-question quiz that makes me put what I just read and what I just learned into practice, and take the quiz over and over until I understand. I think one of the comments I made to you was that the beauty of this is that the questions on the quiz distill down the very essence of what it is you want us to retain and go away with. Even if it's not 100% cemented in our mind, we can go, now, wait a minute, that was in the chapter on defined terms, and at least we have some sort of an idea of where to go back to look for it, or where to get more context, or to check ourselves. So I think the quizzes were incredibly useful to me as a means of checking myself. Did I get what Ken was wanting me to get out of this? And then where to research it, where to go back and read it, and how to apply it, so that, like Gabe said, I can go through and help my clients. And when I'm drafting my own company's contracts, I can make sure I'm about to get all up in that. I am about to really go after our forms as soon as I'm off vacation. That's the other benefit, is that if I have control over those forms, we're about to see a sea change. And I'm looking forward to that because I've got the book to back me up.
Yeah. I'll note that Jen is a little scary in that regard. She had first-hand experience with one of the standard set of terms we looked at, for example. And mind you, Colin is no slouch either. He managed to gently humiliate me on Twitter when I in some random exchange, I said, well, I would say X in this context. And Colin comes along and says, well, actually, section 13.476 says you would say Y in this context. And I promptly fall on my sword. And when someone shows me I'm wrong, particularly in a public forum, I love it. You know, when people show me I'm wrong, I benefit. So thank you, darn it.
I'll tell you, Ken, the good thing about that is that it reinforces what this whole class is about, is that there's so much involved. There's so much to this, and it's so in-depth and complex that even you forget, all 18 chapters that aren't just spewing forth like, water from a fountain, that it's all so complicated that it's got to be a constant practice.
But I think there's good news too, in that writing the sucker was the hardest part. But beyond that, if you just read it, you can better the guy who wrote it, in terms that you can have just as much command or more command of this stuff than I do. Just because, indeed, you have to keep on top of it. But who do you think? Can you identify someone, the kind of person who might benefit from this course, as opposed to doing one of my kind of 3-hour or day-long sessions or just reading the book? Any sense? Leap in,
Um,
whoever.
sure,
Gabe,
if
go
I can
ahead.
leave it.
Go.
I was thinking about this a little bit before we got together. I think that the course will be, well, so I've been practicing for 22 years. And I always thought that I thought of myself as a good drafter. I loved drafting. It was like art, but like coding, but like science, kind of all mixed together. And I developed this style, and I was very entrenched. Like you said, I grabbed a lot of territory. I was very entrenched in the way I drafted things. When I started reading MSCD, sorry, and I was getting ready for the first lesson, I had read an edition from a long time ago, and I hadn't looked at it for a while. It got me to start leading a more examined drafting life. It was a way for me to let go a lot of the fake explanations I had given myself for why things work, and let go of a lot of ballast that I'd collected over my career, and really rethink um, the way and the why of drafting. So I think for people who consider themselves to be experienced in this, who have, like I said, quote unquote, I've been doing this for X years, I think it's a great tool for them to let go of a lot of notions they have without shame and to start with somewhat of there's a lot of, there's a lot of sunk cost in being a drafter for a long time. You sort of feel like, well, I got to keep doing it that way because the contract I wrote 17 years ago said it that way. And if I do it a different way now, I'm admitting that I was wrong. Like, let go of all that. And this really helped me let go of that. So
Sound,
there you go.
sounds like
I
a kind of therapy,
yeah,
Absolutely.
Zen
Absolutely.
kind of
Yeah.
session. Yeah,
cleansing is a
But it was
cleanse.
fun. It's fun too.
yeah.
So
Jen, go ahead, Jen.
My comment was going to be kind of in the same line as Gabe's. For those of us who draft and don't take ourselves so seriously, it's important to let go, like he's saying, of the traditions that have no place, that are just, oh well, that's how it's always been done. And oil and gas law is chock a block of those, full of those. But I think this is also good for the new attorney
mhm.
that's coming in, full of fire and vinegar and all of those things, and oh, and I had to do this and I had to do that. Nobody teaches you proper drafting in law school. Nobody does that.
Yes.
And I encounter that daily. I had an attorney try to write one of my specialty contracts. I'm like, okay, if you don't think I can do it, then you do it. And she had M&A language in it. She had construction language in it. It's like somebody gave her a checklist and she just threw everything but the kitchen sink into the contract, badly worded, badly phrased. So I think the baby lawyers that come onto the scene that are open-minded enough to recognize that they are not God's gift to law at that point, that don't have 3L syndrome, could benefit from this tremendously. But even to get away from lawyers, paralegals, contracts people like myself and like Colin, anytime you can learn a simpler way to say something in English or whatever your chosen language is, but a simpler way to say something in fewer words that means the same thing, but a judge will interpret the way you want it, that's a win. We don't get paid by the word anymore. So any way you can condense all this material down, anybody that does any kind of writing like that, this is invaluable.
Colin, anything to add?
Yeah, I agree with those things. Just to go back to what I said, if anyone who is, what I thought this particular class was best for is somebody who is, there's a body of work that they already have at their company or in their organization or that they've generated before, and they're in a position to improve that body of work going forward. This is a great class because you really come away equipped with the ability to look at these contracts and pick out what's wrong, not just from a negotiating perspective, but just from a clarity perspective and getting things rigorous in your own mind, that you can go ahead and improve those. And like I said, be able to articulate why this is better, have that to back you up. So if you're the first person in your company who's really adopting these stylistic guidelines, or if you're having to deal with people who are, equal or higher in status than you and who are not going to want to make these changes. This kind of class can really prepare you to expand your influence and get these contracts changed to read the way you want.
And justify your reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the dark secret is that the conventional wisdom is flimsy. It's just scarily so. It's just generally it's stuff that's people pick up who knows where and just uh, lob at you as a distraction, as a just as a rationale to justify the awkward reality that they're just riding the copy and paste train and like everyone else. So indeed, as soon as you have something that is reasoned to offer, they tend to fold, or either that or get outraged because you've aggravated their cognitive dissonance in terms of just I've been doing this, the whole I've been doing it for 30 years shtick, which is revealing in its own way.
Yeah.
So
can I add one thing quickly? Just you'd asked about the difference between taking a 3-hour course versus taking something that is broken up into lessons over time. I feel that there's more accountability to yourself and to your classmates if you do it over time. There's a little bit more of an expectation. You come prepared, you're prepared to talk and listen and reason things out together. It makes it more enjoyable to me. I feel like it puts more skin in the game, and many people, including myself, will sit at a CLE presentation or a seminar, and we'll just sit and basically do what backbench like we used to do as a 2L or a 3L, and you walk away and feel like, I heard some interesting things, that was good. But when you really get to interact with the material over a longer period of time, then gives you a much more.
Sure.
Helps you retain it. It helps you retain that much longer.
Yeah, and the 3-hour session is the merest introduction, and then it says, okay, here's the book, go and do your thing, which is just that's challenging. The world of contract drafting is full of challenges, but that's just an initial one. So I think the aim of everything I do is to help people become a better informed consumer and producer of contract language. So I think this just gets people much farther along the curve than they would be otherwise.
Yes.
And it's just you get some momentum going, and you ideally you achieve takeoff velocity a lot sooner than you would otherwise.
And as we share the Tao of kin, and get it spread out there, and more of us use it, and because people steal forms, right? So if they're going to steal a form or
Sure.
copy somebody else's stuff, then if it's written properly to begin with, the cleanliness spreads.
Yeah, the challenges I mentioned include things like, okay, where can I get rational contract language? All that is part of a bigger problem, but the starting point is command of the base, the building blocks of contract language, and you can't really go any farther than that. So without that, so once you have that, then fixing the other things becomes more achievable, and I will focus on that. But the foundation is always what we're is the command of contract language, and in that regard, I think that Masterclass offers a serious enhancement over what is otherwise available, which realistically is the book or the shorter stuff, and over time I will offer other alternatives to suit different appetites and different scheduling constraints. but I'm excited about this, and it was invaluable to have the trial group because I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't have had the luxury of cheerfully screwing up and then fixing stuff. And the fact that you not only survived but found it of value is a source of encouragement to me. So,
I do it again.
uh, okay. Um, I will add, of course, that none of the trial people paid for the privilege of being subjected to imperfect product, but I don't think that had any effect on anything. Any closing thoughts, Colin?
I mean, I'll just add, we all paid an opportunity cost, Ken. We could have been doing other
Oh,
things.
true.
I'm on
Certainly.
vacation.
All right.
I will say, just as a plug for people who don't do contracts much or who are thinking about doing what I'm doing and taking on a contract drafting role at a small company, like the MSCD and this type of course are great preparation. I know in my company, one of the core problems that we have is that lawyers are just really expensive to bring in outside
Mm-hmm.
lawyers. And so there's, if you're a lean company that doesn't have a lot of money, or you feel like your downside risk maybe is pretty low, you don't want to bring in lawyers, and so you're going to get a lot of unexamined contracts. And
Mm-hmm.
if this doesn't have to be the only hat you wear at your company. You can be the HR person, you can be an operations person, you can be, like we were talking about before we started recording, you could be in software development, and there's a lot of parallels there.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're the person at the company who is like, I feel like I've got command of this language, I feel like I can write these and I can look at these that are coming in from our vendors, that are coming in from our partners, and I can give you expert analysis. And you don't have to wait to have a 2-week turnaround for somebody who's, $250 an hour
Mm-hmm.
and is just going to give you a red line and that's it. Like, that is a really compelling value proposition for your job.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I would encourage people to do this as like a just professional development. Make yourself more valuable to your company by learning this language, which your company has to use and no one else speaks it. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's a great skill to have.
Yeah.
All right. Gabe,
Um,
closing thoughts?
I think I mentioned this to you in an email that I was reading one of your blog posts or something, and I was reading it to myself in your voice because your voice is now the embedded voice of reason when it comes to the issues that we've discussed. So I sit here and go through the MSCD and I'm reading a provision, and it helped just bake it into what I'm doing every day. And I had a tricky and or issue yesterday when I was drafting something, and knowing that there are thoughtful answers out there is important. Not just feeling like, well, I'm going to make up my own heuristic and hope it works out. Um, it's it's really been invaluable. So thank you for putting this out there.
Jen?
For someone like me who is in a position to affect the way contracts are written at her company, this was invaluable. It kind of builds on what Colin said. If you're going to write it, go ahead and create something that follows the right rules, that is consistent and clear. With one of the goals being, and I see this from a different perspective perhaps, I want my operations people to be able to pick up one of these contracts and be able to read it clearly and be able to understand it. The rules in your book give me the ability to do that. I get my point across, but it's in clear English, clear language that anyone can read. Because at the end of the day, those are the guys that are probably going to be implementing a lot of the things we write into our contracts. So you can't write it in high lawyer. You have to write it in business person, and so that's what I took away from this.
Oh, great.
But this is great for anyone who writes.
Of course, and lawyers are among the principal victims of the legalistic way of doing things. So it's not like, oh, they are the high priests and know it all. No, they're just as bamboozled as everyone else. But Jen, Colin, Gabe, thank you very much for joining me, and thanks to all the trial participants. And I'm glad you all survived the process. For those of you out there who are interested in checking out Masterclass, adamsdrafting.com is as good a starting point as any. So I hope that I see some of you out there at future master classes. So thank you very
Thank you.
much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.